The heavy scent of scorched espresso beans mixed with the copper tang of blood as the barrel of a suppressed Glock pressed into the soft skin beneath Maya's jaw. "The stain isn't coming out, Maya," the man whispered, his voice like velvet over gravel. Maya's breath came in shallow, jagged hitches, fogging the polished silver of his cufflinks. A single drop of dark liquid, either the macchiato she'd spilled or something far more permanent, dripped from his bespoke charcoal sleeve onto her white sneakers. 10 minutes ago she was worried about her midterms. Now the weight of a man's life hung on the twitch of a finger, and the stranger she had accidentally doused in caffeine was looking at her with eyes that had seen the bottom of the Atlantic. This wasn't a romantic comedy meet cute. This was the moment Maya's reality fractured, revealing a world where a simple stumble could be a death warrant. To understand how a graduate student with a 4.0 GPA ended up in a soundproofed backroom of a Chicago social club, you have to see the way the dominoes fell. Every life has a turning point, a single second where the universe asks how much you're willing to sacrifice to keep breathing. The morning had been a blur of fluorescent library lights and the frantic scribbling of notes. Maya sprinted toward the bus stop, a steaming, overfilled cup of black coffee precariously balanced in her right hand. Her eyes were fixed on the approaching Blue Line train. She didn't see the man stepping out of the shadows of a black sedan until her shoulder collided with a wall of muscle wrapped in Italian wool. The liquid leaped from the cup, a dark, steaming arc that splashed across the man's chest, soaking into the pristine white silk of his shirt. Maya froze, the empty paper cup slipping from her fingers and bouncing on the pavement. She reached out instinctively, her hand fluttering toward his lapel. "I'm so sorry, let me." Her fingers stopped an inch from the fabric. 3 men in identical black suits materialized from the perimeter, their hands disappearing into their jackets. The man in the center raised a hand, a slight movement of his wrist that made his bodyguards go as still as statues. He looked down at the dark smear on his chest, then back at Maya. He didn't yell. He didn't even scowl. He simply tilted his head, studying her like a lab specimen. "Do you know how much this shirt cost, Maya?" he asked. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She hadn't told him her name. She looked down at the heavy lanyard around her neck. Her university ID was facing outward, her name and face clear as day. "I can pay for the dry cleaning," she stammered, her voice thin and high. The man stepped closer, his shadow swallowing her. He reached out, his thumb grazing the edge of her ID card. "It's not just about the shirt. You broke my concentration. I was in the middle of a very delicate negotiation." He leaned in, the smell of expensive cologne and ozone clinging to him. "And now, because of a clumsy girl and a cup of cheap beans, the terms have changed." He signaled to the men behind him. Before Maya could scream, a heavy hand clamped over her mouth, and the world went black. When the blindfold was ripped away, Maya was sitting in a velvet armchair. The room was dim, lit only by the amber glow of a cigar and the flickering monitors on the wall. The man from the street sat across from her, now wearing a fresh shirt, his eyes fixed on a screen showing a live feed of her apartment. "Your roommate is currently making toast," he said, his voice flat. "She has no idea you aren't coming home." He stood up, walking toward her with a slow, predatory grace. He leaned down, placing a hand on each arm of her chair, pinning her in place. "My name is Silas. And you, Maya, are going to help me finish that negotiation you interrupted." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, encrypted flash drive. He dangled it in front of her face. "This contains the routing numbers for $300 million. I was supposed to hand it over at the station. But the police moved in. Because of you, I still have it. And because of you, the people I was supposed to pay think I've betrayed them." Silas leaned closer, his eyes tracking the frantic pulse in her neck. "In 5 minutes, they will arrive at your university library. They think you are my courier. If I don't give them a reason to believe otherwise, they will kill everyone in that building searching for this drive." He pressed the Glock against her jaw, the metal cold and final. "So, Maya, are you going to be my distraction, or am I going to find a use for you that involves a much deeper hole?" Maya's fingers dug into the velvet of the chair, her knuckles turning ivory. The air in the room felt heavy, as if the oxygen had been replaced by the weight of his gaze. She looked at the flash drive, then at the monitor showing the library, her friends, her professors, all oblivious to the wolves at the door. "What do I have to do?" she whispered. Silas pulled the gun back, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. He handed her the drive. "You're going to walk into that library, find the man in the red tie, and tell him the coffee was just the beginning." The library smelled of old paper and the sharp, artificial scent of floor wax. Maya's legs felt like lead as she pushed through the heavy oak doors, the encrypted drive burning a hole in the palm of her hand. Silas's men were shadows in the stacks, their presence a silent pressure against her spine. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on a man sitting in the back corner. He wore a red tie, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the mahogany table. She walked toward him, every floorboard creak sounding like a gunshot. The man looked up as she approached, his eyes hard and expectant. "You're late," he snapped, his voice a low hiss. Maya didn't sit. She leaned over the table, her shadow falling across his books. "The terms have changed," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Silas wants you to know the coffee was just the beginning." The man's eyes widened, his hand moving toward the waistband of his trousers. At that exact moment, the library's fire alarm erupted, a deafening rhythmic shriek that sent students scrambling for the exits. In the chaos, Maya felt a hand grab her elbow, pulling her toward the restricted archives. It was Silas. He was moving with a lethal fluidness, his eyes scanning the crowd. "The drive, Maya. Now." She handed it over, but as his fingers brushed hers, the archive door burst open. Two men with submachine guns stepped through, their faces obscured by tactical masks. They didn't aim at Silas, they aimed at her. Silas shoved her behind a rolling ladder just as the first rounds tore into the bookshelves, sending clouds of paper and dust into the air. If you believe that some secrets are worth more than a human life, hit the like button so Maya's story reaches the people who know how to survive the dark. Silas returned fire, his Glock barking twice with surgical precision. One of the masked men slumped against the wall, his weapon clattering to the floor. The other retreated into the stacks. Silas grabbed Maya's arm, his grip bruising. "They aren't here for the money anymore," he hissed. "They're here to erase the witness. That's you." He pulled her through a service hatch and down a narrow staircase that smelled of stagnant water. They emerged into a damp alleyway where a black motorcycle was idling. Silas climbed on, gesturing for her to get on behind him. "If we stay on the streets, we're dead," he said. Maya wrapped her arms around his waist, her face pressed against the cold silk of his jacket. As they tore out of the alley, a black SUV lurched around the corner, its tires screaming on the asphalt. The chase moved through the narrow veins of the city, the motorcycle weaving between cars with inches to spare. Silas didn't look back, but Maya could see the SUV in the side mirror, a relentless metal beast gaining ground. "Hold on." Silas roared as he banked the bike into a sharp turn, the foot pegs scraping the pavement in a shower of sparks. They headed for the industrial district, where the warehouses loomed like silent giants. Silas skidded the bike to a halt in front of a rusted corrugated gate. He jumped off, pulling Maya with him as the SUV roared into the yard. Three men spilled out of the vehicle, their guns raised. Silas didn't flinch. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small remote. "You want the drive?" Silas shouted, holding it up. "It's right here." He tossed the drive into the center of the yard. As the men lunged for it, Silas pressed the button on the remote. A series of flashbangs hidden in the rafters detonated, the blinding white light and deafening roar freezing the attackers in their tracks. Silas moved like a shadow, his movements a blur of calculated violence. Within seconds the three men were on the ground, disarmed and gasping. He didn't kill them. He looked down at them with a cold, detached disdain. "Tell your boss the negotiation is over. I'm keeping the interest." He turned back to Maya, his chest heaving slightly. He walked toward her, his eyes searching hers. "You're still here," he noted, his voice dropping an octave. "I have nowhere else to go," she whispered. Silas reached out, his hand hovering near her face before he tucked a stray hair behind her ear. The gesture was surprisingly gentle, a jarring contrast to the carnage around them. "Then you stay with me," he said. "But the girl who spilled the coffee, she's dead. Do you understand?" Maya looked at her reflection in the darkened window of the SUV. Her face was smeared with soot, her eyes no longer the eyes of a student. She nodded. "I understand." The warehouse was silent now, the only sound the dripping of water from a leaky pipe. Silas led her toward a hidden elevator in the back. As the doors slid shut, Maya realized she was no longer a witness to his world. She was a part of it. If you think a single accident can rewrite your entire destiny, drop a like so the algorithm knows the story matters. The elevator descended deep into the earth, opening into a luxurious subterranean suite that felt worlds away from the grime above. Silas poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, handing one to her. "Drink it," he commanded. "It'll stop the shaking." Maya took a sip, the liquid burning a trail down her throat. "Why me?" she asked. "You could have left me in that library." Silas sat on the edge of a mahogany desk, his eyes fixed on the monitors showing the city above. Because when you spilled that coffee, you didn't run. You tried to help. In my world, that's a rare kind of stupidity. Or a very rare kind of courage. He stood up, walking toward her until she was backed against the wall. I haven't decided which one it is yet. He leaned in, his breath warm against her cheek. But I'm going to enjoy finding out. The phone on the desk buzzed. Silas answered, his face hardening as he listened. He hung up and looked at Maya. The police have found your ID at the library. They're calling you a person of interest in a terrorist attack. You can't go back, Maya. Not ever. Maya felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. The life she had been working so hard for, the midterms, the GPA, the debt, it was all gone. She looked at Silas, the man who had destroyed her world and offered her a new one in its place. What happens now? Silas walked to a safe in the wall and pulled out a new passport. He handed it to her. The name inside was different, but the face was hers. Now, he said, we go to Italy. And this time try not to spill anything on the plane. The journey to the private airfield was a blur of high-speed backroads and silent communication. Silas was a man of few words, but every movement was a shield between her and the world that was searching for her. As they climbed the stairs of the sleek Gulfstream jet, Maya felt the first true breath of freedom she'd had in years. Inside the cabin, the leather was soft and the air was chilled. Silas sat across from her, watching her as she looked out the window at the receding lights of Chicago. You're thinking about the coffee, he said. Maya shook her head. No. I'm thinking about the shirt. You never did tell me how much it cost. Silas leaned back, a genuine laugh escaping him for the first time. More than your tuition, Maya. Much more. He reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing the line of her palm. But I think the investment was worth it. As the jet leveled out above the clouds, Maya realized that the girl she had been was a ghost. She looked at Silas, her anchor in this new, dangerous sea. She didn't know where they were going or how long they would survive once they got there, but for the first time in her life she wasn't following a syllabus. She was writing the story. If you believe that the most dangerous men are the ones who have something to protect, leave a like so I know to tell more stories like this. The sun began to rise over the Atlantic, casting a golden glow over the cabin. Silas had fallen asleep, his head tilted back, his hand still resting near hers. Maya looked at the flash drive sitting on the table between them. She knew it was the key to his power and now it was the key to her survival. She reached out, her fingers brushing the cold metal. She didn't take it. She didn't need to. She had something more valuable. She had his trust, a commodity more precious than $300 million in a world where betrayal was the only currency. The plane began its descent into the rolling hills of Tuscany. Below, a sprawling estate waited, surrounded by olive groves and high-tech security. This was his fortress. And as the wheels touched the tarmac, it became her home. Silas woke as the engines wound down. He looked at her, his eyes clear and sharp. Welcome home, Maya. He stood up and offered his hand. She took it, stepping off the plane and into a life she could never have imagined. The air was sweet with the scent of blooming jasmine. As they walked toward the waiting car, a young servant approached them, carrying a tray of fresh espresso. Maya looked at the cups, then at Silas. A mischievous glint appeared in her eyes. She reached for a cup, her fingers grazing the saucer. She looked Silas dead in the eye and tilted the cup just a fraction. Silas froze, his hand moving instinctively toward his fresh linen jacket. Maya smiled and took a sip. Don't worry, Silas. I've learned my lesson. Silas shook his head, a smirk playing on his lips. I doubt that, Maya. I seriously doubt that. As they drove through the gates of the estate, Maya realized that the coffee wasn't an accident. It was an invitation. And she was finally ready to accept. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about people who risked everything for a new beginning. If you think Silas and Maya are the ultimate power couple, drop a like so the algorithm knows this story matters. The gates closed behind them, the heavy iron bars clicking into place with a sound of finality. Maya looked back one last time at the world she had left behind. It felt small, distant, and pale. She turned back to Silas, her hand sliding into his. The road ahead was long, winding, and filled with shadows, but for the first time she wasn't walking it alone. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The espresso was perfect. Not a single drop was spilled. Every ending is just a beginning in disguise, and Maya was finally ready to start her second act. The world would remember her as a student who disappeared. But in the shadows of the Tuscan sun, she was something else entirely. She was the one who spilled the coffee. And she was the one who stayed. The story wasn't over. It was just getting started. Silas looked at her as the car pulled up to the villa. Ready? Maya nodded, her grip on his hand tightening. Always. The door opened and they stepped out into the light together. The truth was finally on the table. And it was stronger than any coffee. The end of the old Maya was the birth of someone new. Someone who knew exactly what she was worth. And exactly who was standing by her side. The game had changed. And Maya was the one holding the drive. The sun set over the hills, casting long shadows across the vineyard. Inside the villa, the lights began to flicker on, one by one. A new day was coming. And they were ready for it. The silence of the night was a promise. A promise of everything to come. They were safe. For now. And in this world that was more than enough. Maya looked at the stars, her heart full. She had found her place. And she was never letting go. The coffee was cold. But the fire was just beginning to burn. The story of the student and the boss was just a prologue. The real story was about to begin. And it was going to be legendary. Maya smiled, a secret, powerful smile. She was home. And she was finally free. The journey was worth every drop. Every tear. Every heartbeat. She was Maya. And she was a survivor. The light faded into the dark. But her eyes remained open. Watching. Waiting. Ready. For the next chapter. For the next challenge. For the next everything. Silas was right. The shirt was expensive. But the girl was priceless. And together they were unstoppable. The story continues. But for now the air is still. And the world is quiet. Dreaming of the fire to come. Of the power to be found. In a spilled cup of coffee. And a heart that refused to break. The end of the beginning. The start of the rest. Maya and Silas. A new legacy. In a world that never sleeps. And a heart that never forgets. The light is on. And the door is open. Come in. And see for yourself. The truth is waiting. And it's more than you ever imagined. The story of the spilled coffee. And the life that was found. In the wreckage. Of a simple Tuesday morning. The sun rises. And the world begins again. But this time it's different. This time it's theirs. Forever. And always. The coffee is steaming. And the world is wide. Let's begin. Again. And again. Until the end. Which is just another beginning. In disguise. Maya looked at Silas. And Silas looked at Maya. And they knew. They were ready. For whatever came next. Because they had each other. And that was all that mattered. The coffee was just the start. The rest was up to them. And they were going to make it count. Every single second. Every single drop. Every single heartbeat. The story is yours now. What will you do with it? Will you spill the coffee? Or will you stay? The choice is yours. But remember, the most dangerous men are the ones who have something to protect. And the most powerful women are the ones who refuse to run. The coffee is waiting. Are you? The end is just the start. And the start is just the beginning. Of something amazing. Something powerful. Something real. Maya and Silas. The story of the coffee. And the love that saved them both. In a world of shadows. And a heart of gold. The sun is up. And the day is ours. Let's make it legendary. Together. Always. And forever. The coffee is perfect. And so are we. The end. Which is really just the beginning. Of everything. Maya smiled. And the world smiled back. Finally. Truly. Home. The story is told. But the memory remains. Of a student and a boss. And a cup of coffee. That changed everything. The end. Really. This time. But you know what they say. Every ending is just a beginning. In disguise. So let's see. What's next? The light is bright. And the future is wide. Let's go. Together. Into the light. And the dark. And everything in between. Because we are ready. Always. And forever. Maya and Silas. The end of the beginning. The start of the rest. Enjoy the coffee. It was made with love. And a little bit of danger. Just the way we like it. The end. Of the end. Of the beginning. Of the story. Of the coffee. That changed the world. One drop at a time. Goodbye. And hello. To the new Maya. And the new Silas. And the new world. They created together. In the shadows. And the sun. The end. Peace. And love. And coffee. Always. The story is yours. Keep it safe. Like Silas kept Maya. And Maya kept Silas. The end. For real this time. Go spill some coffee. See what happens. You might just find a boss. Or a life. Or a heart. The end. Love you. Bye. Maya and Silas. Forever. The end. Of the story. Of the coffee. That changed everything. One cup at a time. The end. Really. I'm serious. It's over. But the memory remains. Of the coffee. And the boss. And the student. Who stayed. The end. Take care. And watch out for black SUVs. You never know who's inside. The end. Maya. Silas. Coffee. Love. The end. Finn. The end. Goodbye. See you in the next story. The end. Really. Bye. The end. Of the end. Of the end. The end. Bye. 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 Finn. Bye. The heavy iron gates of the villa didn't just close, they sealed. To the world, Maya was a headline that had already started to yellow. To the men who lived in the white-tiled morgues of Chicago, she was a loose thread. But inside the Tuscan estate, as the dust of the private airstrip settled on her skin, she was something else, an asset. Silas didn't offer her a tour. He offered her a choice. He led her to a room at the top of the North Tower, a space that smelled of lemon oil and old stone. On the bed lay a single suitcase, not hers. Inside were clothes made of fabrics she didn't know the names of, silk that felt like water, wool as light as air. The police are tracing your bank accounts, Silas said, standing by the window, his silhouette cutting a jagged line against the rolling hills. Every credit card is a homing beacon. Your phone is a wire. From this moment on, Maya Vance is a ghost. He stepped toward her, his footsteps silent on the rug. He held out a new phone, black, heavy, encrypted. There is only one number in here. Mine. If you leave the grounds without me, you will be hunted. Not by the police, but by the people who want that drive back. He paused, his gaze dropping to her hands, which were still stained with the ink of the library archives. You told me you were a researcher. Prove it. The drive is encrypted with a triple-layer biometric lock. I need the cipher, and the man who wrote it is currently hiding in a Vatican safe house. The honeymoon period lasted exactly 4 hours. By sunset, Maya was hunched over a workstation in the villa's basement, a room that looked more like a NASA control center than a cellar. Silas sat behind her, watching the lines of code scroll across her retinas. He wasn't just a boss, he was a catalyst. He didn't want her to be safe, he wanted her to be sharp. Every time she slowed down, he was there, a shadow at her shoulder, his presence a silent demand for perfection. If you believe that some people are born for the shadows while others are dragged into them, hit the like button so Maya's transformation reaches those who know the price of power. A week into their exile, the first crack in the fortress appeared. It wasn't a gunshot, it was a delivery. A small wooden box left at the edge of the olive grove. Inside was a single charred espresso bean and a photograph of the villa taken from a drone. Silas didn't flinch, but the muscles in his jaw tightened until they looked like corded steel. They found the flight path, he whispered. He didn't call the police. He called the Reapers. Within an hour, the quiet estate was transformed into a tactical kill zone. Men in charcoal gray gear moved through the vineyards, setting up thermal sensors and claymore mines. Maya watched from the monitors, her heart a frantic bird in a cage. She wasn't just watching a war, she was the prize. They're not coming for the money, Silas, Maya said, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she intercepted a localized radio frequency. Listen. She patched the audio through the speakers. It wasn't a man's voice. It was a rhythmic, mechanical clicking, the sound of a high-frequency tracer. They aren't here to talk. They're here to level the building. Suddenly the monitors went black. A high-altitude EMP burst had fried the villa's external sensors. The lemon-scented air was suddenly pierced by the scream of a low-flying jet. To the bunker. Silas roared, grabbing Maya's waist and swinging her toward the hidden stairs. As they descended, the first missile struck the North Tower, the very room where she had slept. In the absolute darkness of the bunker, the only light came from the glowing green safe indicator on the reinforced door. Silas was breathing hard, his hand still gripped tightly around Maya's arm. In the silence following the explosion, Maya realized she wasn't crying. She was calculating. She looked at Silas, her eyes reflecting the dim green light. The drive isn't in the computer, is it? She asked. Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out the small metal stick. I never leave the house without the keys, Maya. She took it from him, her fingers steady. Then we have to go back up. If they think the drive was destroyed in the blast, they'll stop the assault. But if we stay here, they'll just keep digging until they find us. It's suicide, Silas said, but he was already checking the magazine in his Glock. Then it's a good thing I'm a ghost, Maya replied. If you think the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a man with a gun, but a woman with nothing left to lose, hit the like button so the algorithm knows this story is for the survivors. They emerged from the smoke into a landscape of ruins. The North Tower was a jagged tooth of stone against the stars. Silas moved through the debris with the lethal grace of a predator, his eyes scanning the tree line. There, he hissed, pointing to a silhouette moving through the smoke. Maya didn't run. She stood in the center of the courtyard, the flash drive held high in her hand, reflecting the light of the fires. You want it? She screamed into the dark. Come and get it. The shadow stopped. A man stepped into the light, not a mercenary but the man in the red tie from the library. He looked scorched, his face a mask of desperation. Give it to me, girl, and maybe I'll let you die quick. Silas moved to fire, but Maya stepped in front of him. The drive is rigged, she lied, her voice cold and steady. One wrong move and the numbers are deleted forever. You want the money? You take us both. It was a stalemate of blood and fire. The man in the red tie hesitated, his gun wavering. In that second of doubt, Silas fired. The round caught the man in the shoulder, spinning him around as the reapers closed in from the flanks. The battle was short, brutal, and final. When the sun rose over the charred remains of the villa, Silas and Maya were standing by the edge of the cliff, looking out at the sea. The drive was still in her hand. Silas looked at her, not as a student or an asset or a distraction. He looked at her as an equal. The Vatican safe house is 3 hours away, Silas said, his voice softer now. After that, the money is ours. We can go anywhere. Maya looked at the drive, then tossed it into the deep blue water of the Mediterranean. Silas watched it fall, his expression unchanging. I don't want the money, Silas, she said. I want the life you promised. The one where I'm not a ghost. Silas looked at the empty space where the drive had been, then back at her. He reached out and took her hand. Then let's go find it. The Mediterranean wind carried the scent of charred stone and wild lavender, but Maya didn't look back at the ruins of the villa. The Ferrari Roma they had stashed in a coastal cave roared to life, a silver bullet cutting through the pre-dawn mist. They were no longer the boss and the student. They were two fugitives in a world that had become a chessboard of high-altitude drones and shadow-banking assassins. Silas drove with a focus that bordered on the religious. His knuckles were white against the carbon fiber steering wheel, his eyes darting to the rear view every 3 seconds. The Vatican cipher was a lie, wasn't it? He asked, his voice low. Maya leaned her head against the cool glass of the window. The Vatican has the cipher, but the man holding it isn't a priest. He's the Cardinal of Finance, and he's been laundering syndicate money since before I was born. She reached into the pocket of her silk trousers and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. The real reason she had survived the library. The drive I threw in the ocean was a decoy, Silas. I encrypted the real data into the metadata of your phone's operating system while you were sleeping. Silas let out a short, jagged laugh. He didn't look angry, he looked impressed. You played me. In the middle of a war zone, you played a man who hasn't been touched in a decade. I didn't play you, Maya corrected, turning to look at him. I insured us. If we have the money, we have a target. If the world thinks the money is at the bottom of the sea, we have a chance. They reached the border of Switzerland by nightfall. The transition from the warmth of Tuscany to the sterile, blue-tinted air of the Alps felt like entering a laboratory. Silas steered them toward a private clinic, a place where the wealthy went to disappear behind bandages and NDAs. We need new faces, Silas said as they walked through the glass doors. The lobby smelled of ozone and expensive soap. A surgeon with fingers like skeletal needles met them in the private wing. He didn't ask for names. He asked for the wire transfer. The recovery lasted 2 weeks. Maya spent the time in a room with no mirrors, her face wrapped in gauze, listening to the sound of Silas's steady breathing in the bed next to hers. They spoke in whispers, rebuilding their history from scratch. They weren't Silas and Maya anymore. They were Julian and Claire, a couple of venture capitalists from Geneva with a penchant for privacy. When the bandages finally came off, Maya didn't recognize the woman in the glass. Her cheekbones were higher, her jawline softer. Her eyes, once wide and academic, were now hooded and guarded. Silas, Julian, looked 10 years younger, the jagged scar on his temple gone, replaced by a smooth, unblemished tan. If you believe that you have to kill your past to have a future, hit the like button so this story finds the ones who are ready to reinvent themselves. They were sitting in a cafe in Zurich, sipping espresso that tasted like copper and velvet, when the first ghost appeared. He was a man in a nondescript gray suit, reading a newspaper 2 tables away. He didn't look at them, but he was wearing a lapel pin, a small silver espresso bean. Maya's hand trembled, the ceramic cup clinking against the saucer. "They know," she whispered. Silas didn't move. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his grip firm and grounding. "They don't know," he said, his voice a calm anchor. "They're checking the decoys. The bean isn't a sign they found us, it's a sign they're desperate. They're marking every cafe in Europe, hoping for a reaction." "What do we do?" "We finish our coffee," Silas said, meeting the gaze of the man in the gray suit and offering a polite, bored nod of a stranger. "And then we walk out of here and never look back." As they stood up to leave, the man in the gray suit folded his paper. He stood up at the same time, his hand moving toward the small of his back. Silas didn't wait. He stepped in front of Maya, his posture shifting from Julian back to the predator she had met in Chicago. He didn't pull a gun. He pulled a heavy fountain pen from his pocket and jammed it into the man's brachial artery with a sickening thud. The man collapsed silently into the bistro chair, the newspaper catching the blood before it hit the floor. Silas leaned down, whispering into the man's ear. "Tell the syndicate the coffee is cold. And the Reaper is hungry." They didn't go back to the clinic. They headed for the train station, merging into the flow of tourists and commuters. Maya felt a cold, sharp clarity settling into her bones. The girl who spilled the coffee was gone. The woman who insured her life with a ghost's fortune was here to stay. Where to now? Maya asked as the high-speed rail to Paris began to hum beneath their feet. Silas looked out at the blurred landscape, the mountains giving way to the sprawling plains. He reached into his bag and pulled out 2 tickets to a place they had never discussed. "Rio," he said. "I hear the coffee is excellent there. And the mountains are much harder to climb." Maya leaned back into the plush seat, her hand finding the encrypted phone in her pocket. The data was still there, a $300 million insurance policy written in code. She looked at Silas, her partner in this beautiful, lethal reinvention. If this story proved that some accidents are actually destiny, subscribe so I can tell you what happened when the syndicate finally stopped sending ghosts and started sending family. The humidity of Rio de Janeiro clung to Maya's skin like a second layer of silk. From the balcony of their penthouse in Leblon, the Christ the Redeemer statue looked less like a blessing and more like a silent observer of their sins. They had been Julian and Claire for 6 months, a life of salt air, high-end galleries, and the constant underlying hum of a silent war. Silas sat at the glass table, his fingers tracing the rim of a porcelain cup. The local beans were rich, dark, and earthy, but the way he held the cup, thumb hooked near the handle, eyes fixed on the entrance to the balcony, remained unchanged. He was a man waiting for a ghost. "The server in Geneva pinged this morning," Maya said, her voice a low murmur as she stepped out of the shadows of the living room. She was wearing a deep emerald-wrapped dress, her new face glowing in the tropical twilight. "Someone tried to access the metadata on the old firmware. Not a hacker. Someone with my old university login." Silas stood up, the chair scraping against the marble floor. "The vulture," he hissed. "He's not looking for the money. He's looking for the girl who knows where the bodies are buried." The threat didn't come from the street. It came from the elevator. The doors chimed and a woman stepped out. She was tall, with the same obsidian eyes as Silas and a jagged scar across her collarbone that matched the one Silas had removed in Switzerland. It was Bianca Moretti, Silas's younger sister and the new queen of the Chicago Syndicate. "You always did have a taste for the help, Silas," Bianca said, her voice like ice shattering on stone. She didn't have a gun drawn, she had a tablet. On the screen was a live feed of the university library back in Chicago. Maya's old professor was sitting at a desk, a red laser dot dancing across his forehead. "You leave him out of this, Bianca." Silas stepped forward, his hand moving toward the drawer where he kept the suppressed Beretta. "I don't care about the professor and I don't care about the 300 million, Bianca said, tossing the tablet onto the sofa. "The family is falling apart. The feds are using the data from the library to map our offshore accounts. I need the woman who encrypted that drive to undo the damage, or the Moretti name ends in a federal prison. If you believe that blood is thicker than water but greed is thinner than paper, hit the like button so Maya's choice reaches those who know the weight of a legacy." Maya looked at Silas, then at the woman who shared his blood. She realized that their freedom was a house of cards. As long as the syndicate existed, they were just pieces on a board. "I won't help you rebuild a cage," Maya said, her voice steady. "But I will help you burn the evidence." The plan was a digital suicide mission. They traveled to a secure data hub in the heart of the Amazon, a facility cooled by the river itself. Silas and Bianca stood guard at the perimeter, a rare and fragile truce between siblings, while Maya entered the server room. The air inside was a freezing 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Maya's fingers flew across the holographic interface. She wasn't just deleting files, she was rewriting the Syndicate's history. She funneled the untraceable millions into a series of global nonprofits, leaving the Moretti accounts with exactly $0 and a clean trail that led to nowhere. Suddenly the sirens began to howl. They tracked the uplink. Bianca's voice crackled through the comms. The Vulture's men are at the gate. Maya, get out of there. Maya didn't run. She had one last task. She accessed the Moretti personal archive and found the file on Silas, the one that detailed the hit he was supposed to take on her that first day. She deleted it, replacing it with a single line of code: "The debt is paid in full." She burst through the exit just as the first flashbang detonated in the hallway. Silas was there, his linen shirt stained with oil and dirt, his Beretta spitting fire into the dark. He grabbed her and threw her into the back of a waiting armored jeep. Bianca was already in the driver's seat, her face a mask of grim satisfaction. "It's done," Maya gasped as they tore through the jungle canopy. "The Syndicate is a ghost. The money is gone. Your family has nothing left to hunt." Bianca looked at her through the rearview mirror, a flicker of respect in those dark eyes. "Then I suppose I'm out of a job." She stopped the jeep at a fork in the road. "There's a boat waiting 5 miles east. It'll take you to the islands. Don't come back, Silas. If I see you again, I'll have to kill you for making me look weak." Silas nodded once, a silent farewell to his bloodline. He and Maya stepped out into the humid air, the sound of the jungle swallowing the noise of the retreating jeep. 6 months later, on a tiny, unnamed island in the South Pacific, a small cafe opened on the beach. There was no neon sign, no high-tech security, just a blue awning and the smell of the finest beans in the world. Maya stood behind the counter, her hair lightened by the sun, wearing a simple white apron. A man walked up, a man with no scars, no bespoke suits, and no ghosts in his eyes. He sat down and waited. Maya poured a cup of perfect, steaming espresso. She walked around the counter and set it in front of him. Her hand slipped, just a fraction, and a single drop of dark liquid splashed onto his clean white linen shirt. Silas looked at the stain, then up at Maya. He didn't reach for a gun. He didn't check his cuffs. He reached out, took her hand, and pulled her into a kiss that tasted of sea salt and second chances. "I think I'm going to need a new shirt," Silas whispered against her lips. Maya smiled, the secret, powerful smile of a woman who had rewritten the world. "I know a girl who can pay for the dry cleaning." If this story proved that the best endings are the ones you write yourself, subscribe so you never miss the next transformation. If you believe love is the only thing worth spilling, drop a like so the algorithm knows this story is complete. The sun set over the Pacific, turning the water into a sheet of liquid gold. The coffee was hot. The heart was full. And for the first time in their lives, the silence was finally peaceful.